I never believed this would happen, but you all have been waiting for her, and here she is. The Princess of Manchaland Rodion has been released into Limbus company, potentially changing the way bleed teams are played forever. Princess Rodya is our newest addition to the Bloodfiend subclass of bleed identities, and as expected of a second kindred, she has some incredibly strong skills, abilities and effects that make her a very desirable identity. In today's video, I want to go over the things Rodya does best, how she synergizes with the rest of her Bloodfiend friends, as well as her older bleed identities, and by the end of the video, you will know just how impactful Princess Rodya can be. I will start off by explaining the effects of her skills and passives, and then we'll take a look at how Rodya impacts the performance of other identities on her team, and we'll finish off with the biggest change to bleed teams in the history of Limbus company, so make sure to watch till the end of the video. But before I start, I have to tell you that most of my viewers are not subscribed. Subscribing helps me out a lot, and takes just one click. I also have the number of people returning to my videos, and all I'll say is that it's a whole lot larger than my sub count, so if you're enjoying my videos enough to come back every upload, you definitely should consider subscribing to the channel. The YouTube algorithm works in mysterious ways, and every sub counts. But without further ado, let's get back to our princess. We'll start off with her skills. Rodya's skill 1 is a Pride Pierce skill that reaches 15 power with this condition fulfilled. At combat start, she consumes up to 20 Blood Fist and applies 1 Blooming Thorn on herself and 1 ally with the most max HP per 10 Blood Fist consumed. This effect prioritizes Bloodfiends and applies 1 more Blooming Thorn on them. If the skill doesn't consume Blood Fist, Rodya is inflicted with 5 bleed. The second coin of the skill inflicts 1 bleed and Rupture. By the way, we will go over Blooming Thorn right after I'm done with her skills. Rodya's second skill is a 3-coin Envy Pierce skill that reaches 24 power with its conditionals and effect active. At combat start, Rodya and 1 ally with the least max HP gain 1 attack power up, and Rodya consumes up to 30 Blood Fist to apply 1 Blooming Thorn per 10 Blood Fist consumed. This effect can only be used twice in one turn, and it also prioritizes Bloodfiend allies. The effect is improved when targeting Bloodfiends, applying 1 more attack power up and 2 more Blooming Thorn. As Rodya is a Bloodfiend, the effect is improved when hitting her, which allows her to get to 24 power with this skill. The first coin of the skill inflicts 2 Rupture and Bleed count, while the third one inflicts 1 Rupture and 1 Bleed. Rodya's third skill comes in 2 flavors. As usual, having a lot of Rodya's unique effect improves the skill, but instead of giving it better stats, Rodya simply activates a stronger version of the attack. This effect is procced when she is at 25 stacks of Blooming Thorn or more. But let's start with the base version of the skill. The Festival Will End is a 3-coin Last Pierce skill that reaches 19 power with this conditional. On use, this skill applies a new effect called Festive Fever on Rodya and a number of allies equal to the highest resonance. The amount of effect applied is equal to 3 plus 1 per 50 Blood Fist consumed by Rodya. Rodya and the same amount of allies are also inflicted with 3 stacks of Blooming Thorn. The first coin of the skill inflicts 1 Rupture and Bleed count, while the second and third inflict 1 Rupture and Bleed each. The improved version of Rodya's third skill has a really long name, and deals an equally large amount of damage. Ascended Don Quixote Heartblood Arts The Finale has 1 more coin power than its base form, and has 3 attack weight instead of 1. It also has 2 more offense level in comparison. The Festive Fever infliction of the skill starts at 5, and it applies 5 Blooming Thorn instead of 3. The skill also does more damage for every 5 Blood Fist consumed, up to 50%. The coins of the Finale inflict double the amount of effects than that of the base form as well. All these big stat increases are balanced out by the fact that after the attack, Rodya consumes all Blooming Thorn on herself. The Finale is a powerful skill, having both high damage and a lot of utility. Out of the third skills of all the Bloodfiends, so far Rodya's is the best. A bit later on, we'll delve into just how strong the skill really is. Rodya's defensive skill is a clashable counter, which makes her the second identity with this mechanic after Wild Hunt Heathcliff. Rodya's counter reaches 13 power, and on use, it reduces the bleed count of 2 other allies with the most bleed by 3, and then increases Blood Fist by their bleed potency times count before the reduction. If this effect targets a Blood Fiend, it reduces their bleed count by 2 more. On Clash Win, Rodya gains 4 Blooming Thorn, and the coins of the skill inflict a total 2 bleed and 1 bleed count. Rodya's passive is our newest double cost passive, as it requires both Envy and Lust. The effect of Heartblood Thorn is that whenever an ally other than Rodya takes bleed damage or consumes Blood Fist, she gains 1 Blooming Thorn, up to 5 times per turn. Whenever Rodya deals damage, she heals by 20% of damage dealt, up to 10 HP per skill. And max HP, the healing is forwarded to the ally with the least HP. Much like her combat passive, Rodya's support passive requires Lust and Envy, and it allows one ally with the highest bleed potency to convert up to 6 bleed on self into up to 3 Blooming Thorn. And now that we're done with reading out Rodya's abilities, I want to talk about what she can do on the battlefield. And the short answer to that is a lot. On her own, Rodion is a good pierce damage dealer, with decent enough bleed count infliction to instantly make the cut for being put on a bleed team. Her second skill effectively has a base power of 6 instead of 4, making it good at clashing even without conditionals. And when the conditionals are fulfilled, Rodya becomes a very potent clasher, as her skill 2 reaches more power than the skill 3 of most identities in the game. Her second skill also affects one ally with the least max HP. By design, it probably should be targeting Barber Otis, due to her low base HP. This allows Otis to reach even higher clash power values with her skills, and makes her third skill a bit more consistent in winning tough clashes, which is something she greatly appreciates. However, on a normal bleed team, as it looks now, this skill's effect is going to hit Ancorp Faust. And while she is not a Blood Fiend, making the effect half as useful, she still really needs that additional power, with her abhorrent power values on her skills 1 and 3. This skill and its effect are already good enough to consider Rodya a permanent starter in Bleed, but this is only the beginning. Rodya's first skill specifically targets the ally with the highest max HP, which obviously synergizes with Priest Gregor. The skill's effects also allow Gregor to get a ton of Blooming Thorn early, which meshes well with his stats and role. Speaking of Blooming Thorn, let's go over this effect. It stacks up to 10 on anyone who isn't Rodya, and goes up to 30 on our princess. The ally with the effect gets 1 defense level up for every 2 stacks of Blooming Thorn, up to 5. And whenever an ally with the effect gets hit, the attacker is inflicted with 1 bleed, and the Blooming Thorn goes down by 1. This is the global part of the effect. However, Rodya gets some unique effects as well. Much like Otis's Scissor Blades and Gregor's Hands, Rodya's Thorn has 3 stages, with the first one not having any special properties, but at stage 2, Rodya starts inflicting 1 more bleed and rupture potency with her skills, and at stage 3, that effect doubles, making Rodya a very potent bleed inflictor. And rupture, I guess. Blooming Thorn's defense level up application helps Gregor tank more damage, and coupled with Rodya's counter and passive, it makes the priest pretty much unkillable. This is a huge synergy, as it allows you to play very recklessly with Gregor and end up with a lot of Blood Fist and no repercussions. Speaking of synergy, the one thing I was worried about when Rodya was teased was the fact that she's a higher kindred than the rest of our identities, which makes it impossible for Otis and Gregor to consume Blood Fist before Rodion does so. However, luckily, both her first and second skill consume Blood Fist at combat start, so it's literally impossible for the others to outspeed this effect and screw themselves over. Rodion's third skill also showcases her team-focused nature, as she applies Festive Fever on allies whenever she uses either version of the skill. Festive Fever is an effect that stacks up to a maximum of 10, and exists only for 1 turn. Well, Rodya's third skill applies it on the current and next turn, so technically it exists for 2, but that's just 2 applications and Festive Fever itself expires at turn end. Whenever an ally with this effect hits an enemy with bleed, that attack deals 1.5% more damage per stack. This effect is doubled if the skill used for the attack gains or consumes Blood Fist. Festive Fever is an incredibly powerful effect, as at its best it's literally 15% free damage for monsters like Rinyi-san and Rep Ryoshu, and 30% damage to Gregor and Otis, both of whom can time it on their nukes to deal insane damage. However, the most fun part of Rodya's third skill is using its alternate variant to demolish the enemies, So let's take a look at how much damage the finale can deal. When hitting 3 enemies with neutral resistances and 6 bleed, and with Rodya at max Festive Fever and Bloodfist consumed, Ascended Don Quixote Heartblood Arts The Finale deals 259 damage, with it obviously being increased against Pierce and Last Week enemies, as well as enemies who are staggered. This also does not take into account the 5 offense level of the skill, and the additional offense level Rodya would get from using the finale in a long last chain, as is intended. With all of that taken into consideration, it's not super uncommon to see Rodya's nuke go off for upwards of 700 damage, which is an inconceivably large amount of damage to be dealing outside of mirror dungeons. The rest of Rodya's abilities just slightly help her, and also Gregor, with her counter and passive keeping him alive for extended periods of time, as I've already said. With all the things I've already said about Rodya, you could probably figure out that she's pretty good. And yet, the biggest part of why she's busted is not something I've touched upon in this video. Of course, I'm talking about Sanguine Desire, the broken ego that held Rodya back from getting a bleed AD up until the princess. Sanguine Desire needs no introduction, but in case you're new to Limbus company, let me quickly explain it. This skill is a last WoW ego skill, which forces its main target to not lose bleed count for the duration of the turn. Basically, what Sanguine Desire does is allow you to entirely forgo bleed count infliction and focus on only bleed potency, as this skill effectively inflicts the enemy with an infinite amount of bleed count. On top of this insane effect, Sanguine Desire can also roll up to 42, and can deal huge last affinity damage when put into a last chain. With how powerful this ego is, Sanguine Desire obviously needs some kind of balancing factor as to not make it overly oppressive. That counterweight has always been the fact that Rodya doesn't have any good bleed identities that would use the skill, so putting her on your team meant losing one effective slot in order to use Sanguine Desire. Of course, that has changed now, fully bringing Sanguine Desire into the bleed team. But Princess Rodya is more than just a good bleed identity. Her skills very specifically fuel Sanguine Desire. That skill requires 3 Lust, Envy and Pride, as well as 1 Wrath. Seems familiar? That's right. The sin affinities that are required in the highest amount are literally the 3 affinities Rodya generates with her skills, making her perfect for using this ego. Another change that supports Sanguine Desire is the state of the bleed team itself. Rep Roshu, Barber Otis and Priest Gregor all excel at inflicting bleed potency, but when you actually use the identities against bosses, you're likely to encounter a lot of count problems. While I was a big proponent of keeping Ring Otis on the team for her bleed count infliction because of that, the addition of Sanguine Desire alongside yet another powerful bleed inflictor in Rodion makes it more efficient to simply rely on Sanguine Desire's effects in order to keep up the bleed stack, while actively using the huge damage of the newest identities to quickly beat down the enemy, ending fights much quicker than you would normally. Overall, the Princess of Manchaland Rodion is one of the best identities in Bleed, and I would go as far as to say that she's the second identity in the history of the game to be able to contest Ring Yisang for the spot of the best Bleed identity in Limbus company. She has huge damage, high clash power, self-healing, ally healing, defensive support and offensive support, she can provide a lifeline when clearing the newest content, and her skills fit well with the rest of the team. All the while Rodya gets access to a potentially game-breaking ego skill on the side. There is literally no metric where Rodya is below average, and her not even being the crown jewel of the season really goes to show what kind of monster we can expect the Dawn identity to be in the future. If you are not sure about pulling for her, you definitely should. If you're not sure if you want to shard her, don't hesitate to spend the 400 shards, because she is most definitely worth it. The best identity of the season so far, and on top of that, I can't take my eyes off her chest. 10 out of 10. If you enjoyed the video at any point, consider leaving a like, and if you want to see more content like this in the future or find yourself coming back to my videos, make sure to subscribe to my channel to never miss my new uploads. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye!